Welcome to the What's Up Solar Podcast, where we converse about what's up in solar and sun meets strategy. I'm your host, Emmitt Muckles, solar educator, solar consultant, and advocate for the sun. Each episode, we dive into laid-back yet powerful conversations with industry experts, solar pros, and everyday people making the switch to clean energy. Whether you're a homeowner curious about going solar or a seasoned installer looking to stay sharp, or just in the biz of solar, this is the space to plug in and power up. Make sure you subscribe to the What's Up Solar Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to What's Up Solar Podcast. This is Emmitt Muckles, sponsored by SE Power Consulting. If you would like to be a sponsor, you can always reach out to contact@sepowerconsulting.com. Today, my guest is Tyler. I'm not going to even mutilate his last name because we just had this conversation.
Yeah.
Tyler and I go back over a decade. Tyler is vice president of sustainability, board member, and minority investor in Inovateus Solar. Here's my love with Inovateus Solar. So I was with Battle of the Bands some years ago, and they recorded it, and it was so beautifully recorded. And so thank you for that. But he's also a board
Absolutely.
member and co-owner of Logistic Inc., which are both South Bend based companies. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to have Tyler on, is because we're both in Indiana and the Midwest, and it is not very well represented in the solar scape or the renewable scape. As a matter of fact, I live in Valparaiso, and they are animate against solar in some respects, but everybody has a Tesla.
Yeah.
There's more Teslas here than like San Francisco.
Yeah.
Um, you do a lot of things, man. You playing the drums, you're eco adventuring, you're really into sustainability, and your company, it's a family owned or family founded company, correct?
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
around 2008, was it your father that brought this to fruition?
Yep. My dad, my brother TJ, George Howard, who was a professor at Notre Dame, and then Nathan Vogel, who's still with the company today, was involved in the early days as well.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
2008.
yeah, so we got together during my Fronius days and doing a lot of training. But since then, you guys have grown exponentially. And in this industry, what is sustainable solar development? Because you guys are an EPC basically. I mean, now, right?
Yep. We've traditionally been an EPC, and we've gotten more into development work in the recent years, and we're even, I mean, I think pretty soon going to be maybe more of a developer than an EPC. But when we started, and I was in college when the company started, and I graduated in 2012, and I it was my first job out of college. I had interned with Innovatus, and I was pretty passionate about sustainability then. But just doing renewable energy back then, around 2010 was seen as, oh, you're a company that's focused on sustainability. And then I think it was later. It was probably like 2008, 18. We started realizing that a lot of companies weren't even doing basic things like sustainability reports
Yeah.
and being transparent about like waste and recycling and how they go above and beyond in terms of environment, as well as like the culture. Um, so kind of the ESG, environmental, social governance, or people, planet, profit, that kind of the triple bottom line. So basically, we realized, hey, we need to start kind of beating the drum to sustainability and try to encourage the industry to evolve. And we feel like we were a part of that transition of more transparency and kind of pushing folks to be more sustainable
Yeah.
when they're developing on farmland, or when you're doing solar on a building, you're not having as much impact on the ground. But we got more into ground mount solar, and sometimes you had to take down a couple trees, or
Yeah.
um, you get into these areas where it's can be a little bit environmentally sensitive. So
I have a question about that. So, does trenching affect any of that? Because, many times you may, like you said, you may have to take down a tree, but a tree's roots can go far. So, the tree may not even be in your path, but you might have to destroy the root system if does that impact that as well?
yeah, I think you can kind of degrade the soil, when you're removing some trees, and because what I've learned is when you do things like pollinator plants, or like native habitat, all of the roots do grow deep,
Yeah.
and it helps with stormwater management, but it also helps the soil health. It helps sequester carbon in the soil.
Yeah.
Um, all the plant and bug life, I think is impacted when you remove things. So we've been trying to restore or add pollinator habitat into the solar arrays that we're building. And now we've seen pollinator habitat or even sheep grazing just really kind of explode in the industry.
That's what I was gonna. I made a post about that a couple of months ago about
Yeah.
sheep grazing, but living in the Midwest, then you can bring in other um, animals, such as you could have your cows, but cows are big; they could destroy things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Cows, the bigger the animal, I think the higher the array has to be off the ground.
So you have to have a carport after a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Sheep seem to be the easiest, and they're a great lawnmower.
Yeah,
So
they are.
instead of spending money and gas emissions on mowing, you're moving the sheep around, and so we've learned about sheep grazing, and now there's the is it ASGA? It's the Solar Grazing Association.
There
Um,
is a so I now this is something new to me. I've learned something. There is a solar grazing. How does that work? Do they say, "Hey, how many sheep do you need?" Well, you need this many per hectare, or
yeah, a lot of it's networking and education. So yeah, it's ASGA, American Solar Grazing Association, and yeah, there's a lot of technique to it. You don't want to just like let sheep sit there and eat the crap out of an area. So you got to move them around, and there's a lot of grazers, companies that will bring their sheep out that you can contract with. Um, so it's a great organization. They have a membership group, and they're doing monthly meetings or maybe even weekly meetings that you can join and learn about all the people in this space of grazing.
so we talk. I know we're going off on a tangent here, but this is fascinating to me. So I
Yeah,
know that you can have sheep, but goats graze as well. But goats like to climb, so they wouldn't be a good candidate for a PV farm.
correct. I don't think we've ever been involved with goat grazing. I've heard of it being done, but it doesn't seem all that common because I think they're curious. They like chewing on the wrong things, and maybe jump. I've heard they'll jump on the solar panels.
Yeah.
So I think if you're doing like a small solar farm on like a hobby farm, and you have animals, you can probably manage it. But on a utility scale,
No.
I don't think the goat grazing is all that popular, and it's mostly the sheep.
So goats are good if you're doing yoga and solar.
Yep.
Sheep are the opposite. If you're doing utility scale or distributed energy, then you want to go with sheep. Um,
Yep.
you're in between two good worlds. And what I mean by that is because you're in Indiana, you deal with agri voltaics
Yep.
and you deal with commercial and distributed. What is the difference, and how come you don't hear so much about agrivoltaics as you do some of the other things?
Yeah, I think agrivoltaics makes sense for sure on when you're talking bigger scale, you're using up a lot of ground and more like the distributed, the commercial, I guess tends to be on your big buildings, distribution buildings or manufacturing buildings. Um, we used to do like when I started with Innovatus, I'd say from like 2010 to 2015, it seemed like we were mostly doing big buildings still. Like we were working with like the IKEAs
Yeah.
or the Walmarts um, and then all of a sudden we were uh, quoting these big utility farms around 2015, and it seemed like we kind of transitioned into doing more big ground mounts. So I think a lot of that just the utilities finally being more proactive and solar and getting involved. Um, and yeah, I think agrivoltaics is still pretty new. Like it's really taken off. I think maybe since 2020, it's really started
Really?
to take. But in a lot of, I think in a lot of areas, it's still new. Like doing pollinator habitat or
Uh,
doing, you can literally do crops underneath the solar panels if you have them high enough off the ground, or do the sheep grazing. Basically, when I think of agrivoltaics, I just think ways that you can be more eco-friendly with the ground because that space is now used for solar. So
hmm.
what it's like dual solar, just like a building, the roof is covering the building and then you add solar, so that's got a dual purpose. So I
Yeah.
think when I think of agrivoltaics, it's just ways that you can be more sustainable and it's still new, I think, to a lot of folks, but that term is more and more common now in the
I,
industry, it seems
I'm
like.
su I'm surprised because I remember having to go out and what were they? Pig farms.
Oh yeah.
So, you have these long buildings with a
Yep.
lot of livestock inside, and then there's this huge array that's on it. And then they'll have some land that's next to it, usually a pond, a special pond next
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah.
But that's what I was thinking of when we were kind of communicating back and forth about agrivoltaics. I wasn't thinking about using the ground mount um, for that purpose. But now that I've traveled back and forth to Michigan because I go back to Detroit, and I seen a huge farm that's right off 94, but that's what agrivoltaics are because now these farmers can lease this land if um
Yeah.
and still farm on the rest of their land, but they can have revenue generations from several different areas. But you've kind of opened my eyes to it because I was really thinking about on buildings and was going from what you were doing with the IKEAs and things. Was that a big shift to get into these large distributed systems and ground mounts that you started working on?
Yeah, I think the biggest transition was all of a sudden you're talking, substations and now you have a bigger system with a lot more power that you have to integrate into the infrastructure, to the power grid, and um, so you're talking, bigger transformers
Yeah.
and all of that, and it was interesting to hear about. You'd almost have a separate project where they would be building, a substation and all that heavy duty equipment to connect into the grid to bring that solar into the grid. So at times, some of these projects, it's like that's a separate project. You're working on your solar, then you're working on like the upgrades to tie into the grid, and that was a big learning curve and
So
kind of
do
mind
you guys
blowing.
integrate all of that as well? Like the medium voltage transformer, do you have to put a switch gear or there's a bunch of things that we don't talk about in solar that goes between the system and the grid. such as
Yeah.
transformers, switches. Uh, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So much stuff. We are involved with it, and we have managed that work. But sometimes the utility, depending on the company, they'll hire a separate like general contractor to do that work kind of simultaneously or on the back end of the solar. So it's interesting. We're capable of doing it, but we actually we just wrapped up a really big solar farm here in St. Joe County, where South Bend is at. It's we partnered with Light Source BP, and it's 188 megawatts, I think,
Ooh,
DC.
drop that pin on me. I want to fly over it with my drone.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not too far from you in Valpo.
I know. I
You could
want.
probably find it.
I've been doing that. I've been going as I move through this area and I see solar, particularly on farms or if it's on a roof that nobody can see, there's a database that you can actually see them. And I just, on a Saturday morning, take my drone out and I fly over and
I love it.
capture it. I am a nerd for this stuff. And
Oh yeah,
that was the reason I got into drones was because I started seeing them a couple of years ago being used for inspections.
it's so cool. Yeah, like the radar or like kind of seeing which panels are underperforming or
Yeah. So
have.
you can use LiDAR and thermal. Are you guys adopting that technology, or are you on the front side where you're just doing a lot of building, or are you doing O&M as well?
So we do dabble in O&M, and we usually, so we're basically a when it comes to all of our EPC work, we contract out all the work. We don't have any of our own crews. We've kind of dabbled and had some of our own crews and thought about going that direction where we self-perform, but really we contract out all of our work. So we work with an O&M company. So we're involved with it. And you know, in terms of sustainability, that's another huge thing is like making sure this array is working well,
Yeah.
and performing to its maximum potential for a long time, and um, on on top of like all the vegetative stuff or the recycling stuff that you're doing. So I love how the technology's grown in that area too, and the lidar stuff that it makes total sense.
You mentioned to something to me about a farm being a carbon sink. What do you explain that
Yeah,
to me? I was just that was what was in my head. Not
yeah,
static.
yeah. Like what the heck is that? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We did a project in Illinois with the University of Illinois. Actually, it was with Soul Systems too. They were more of the developer and financing it, and they contracted us to help them build it. And some students, I think they were grad students, they did some reporting, a deep dive on the all the benefits, the eco benefits, and basically the total footprint of a solar farm, going from the procurement, the material, and then the build, and then the long term, kind of basically a life cycle analysis when
Yeah.
you really figure out, okay, what's your total carbon footprint of something. Life cycle analysis is common in the world of manufacturing. So they took
Yes,
that
it is.
strategy to a solar farm, and they had two teams doing it, and they did a deep dive. And what they came back with was that after so many years, I forget the exact year, it might have been like year 5 or year 7, that you cancel out all the emissions, all the negative emissions that took to make and build that array, and then after that, that solar array became a carbon sink, and they did pollinator habitat there. So I think that's kind of a big way you can do that, is if you do like try to do like a native flowers and plants and things that would grow in that region, plant them under the solar, and then they're growing root systems and helping the soil health for 20 plus years of that array, that's really where you form that carbon sink. And then you factor in that it's solar energy and now you've negated all the emissions to build those solar panels, and now they're producing clean energy. So that's where I in my head I'm like, wow, these solar farms can be a carbon sink actually, and and that was kind of a game changer.
You're making me think here. So is first of all, I own property just south of Valpo that's on a lake, and it's a community, and it's this gorgeous ecosystem. But recently, I found out that we have these invasive species of plants that are like killing the floor of
Yeah,
this.
take over.
Yeah, is that a thing that can happen with these arrays too? Like you can be conscious about, hey, we want to produce energy, we want to balance out this ecosystem, but then you got this thing like Debo and Fridays that just comes in and like, nah.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great point. I think especially the first 2 to 3 years when you do a pollinator habitat, you have to manage it very well and maybe some select mowing and select spray,
Yeah.
kind of some selective herbicides. You're still trying to be as eco-friendly as possible, but you want to manage the invasives or any type of plants that could outcompete the other plants you want to grow there, like the more native ones. So usually after 2, 3 years of really good management, um, it's the natives tend to finally like they can they're just like, oh, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, they
Um,
form their union, huh?
yeah, yep, yep. They get in there, they get their healthy roots going. Now, woody plants like trees can still pop up. So like mowing and usually in the spring can be a good tactic, like forever, for as long as the habitat's there and the array's there. But then after that, it's not like you're mowing regularly. You let the habitat grow out. But like a mow in the spring, or sometimes even if you want to mow in the fall, can be can be good. And you don't have to mow down 2, 3 inches. It's like a 6 to 10 inch mow type of thing.
Yeah, because most
Um,
of these arrays are at least 4 feet off the ground at the lowest point.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
usually, yeah, 30 inches kind of range or more. Yeah,
yeah.
36.
So
Yep.
if you've got grass that is that tall, and you've
Yeah.
neglected that for, and I've seen this actually with some reclaims. One question I wanted to know about are you, is Innovatus getting into the repower of old systems?
Yeah, we get asked about it a lot. Especially like recycling old equipment and they
Yeah,
want to replace equipment. Um, we're starting to hit that time frame. I think it's going to happen more and more.
yeah.
We haven't done a lot of it. It seems to be more new builds, but since we started in 2008 and now a lot of these arrays out there are 15 years old, now the technology's improved so much. Like we've started to get the questions, and I think they're just going to kind of pour in of, can you guys replace the equipment, recycle the old,
Yeah.
or repower this array? Yeah, it seems to be like right around the corner where that stuff's really gonna pop.
Okay, I got a question for you. Central inverter or single inverter? Which is
I've
your
always
favorite?
I've always liked single, more like more distributed
Yeah.
um, throughout the array. We've, as a company, we've done more central with these big arrays, but personally, I've always liked the idea of be hyper efficient, like with like microgrids within your bigger array.
Yeah, because and that leads into the repower uh question because I've gone out to sites recently where they have these advanced energy
Yep,
central inverters, and they're like,
these
that's
big dogs.
out of here. But then you have, like you were saying, that repower. And I'm asking this because of the sustainability factor. Now you have to rethink the whole thing because now you might have to take modules off because the strings, the modules don't equate to the strings that were, or, there's just a bunch of things that you have to think about when you think about 2010 versus 2025 and the
Yeah,
technology. A panel back then, what, max 285 watts?
yeah, yeah. 250, 280s were like a big deal then, and
Yeah,
now
now
it's
you
like,
get 700 with bifacial.
yeah. And I do like the bifacial panels now because especially when you're doing habitat, you get some more light penetrating
Oh,
through the solar panels, and you get more production. Um, that array I mentioned in Illinois, where we were talking, this is like a carbon sink that used bifacial panels, and that was another part of the study. And um, so yeah, I think the technology's grown so much, and that's another part of the sustainability story. I think is really utilizing the technology to the best of your ability, and trying to produce more power per square foot. That's kind of that
yeah.
in our sustainable solar development goals. That's one of them is basically design and efficiency and maximizing your power per square foot, so you're not taking up more land or more building space. Sometimes you might have to spend a little more up front for more higher performing equipment and all that, but it's worth it in the long run in terms of power production and your upfront sustainability story. So,
So regarding the sustainability, if you had a magic wand, what would be your communication be across companies across the United States, across the globe for companies like yours? If they're not into it, where would you say they start?
yeah, I think some of the low hanging fruits of sustainability are like trying to recycle everything during construction because
That's a good one.
it's a lot of pallets, a lot of cardboard, and that stuff's pretty easy to recycle. You can try to find a local or a regional recycler to take the pallets or take the cardboard, or even bring dumpsters out there for the recyclables. And then you might have to get creative with some of the other material streams, like your banding or your shrink wrap or your metal banding and plastic banding, and sometimes wood. Sometimes things are crated and brought in on wood, so you might have to ask them about, hey, what do we do with all this wood? Um, but that's something that one of the first things we did was try to do like a zero waste job site, and
That was, I bet you that was a challenge, was.
that's a challenge, and it's still really hard. A lot of times 90% recycle rate's pretty good if you
Where,
could do 90%, and that means you're throwing out the other 10%. And then if you have any broken equipment, materials, solar panels on site, you obviously make sure you're recycling those. And it's been amazing to see all the solar panel recyclers pop up over the years. And now that's
yeah.
really an infrastructure for the solar industry. And when people say, "Hey, can you recycle a solar panel?" You show them, well, here's like 20 companies that are doing it here in the US now. So you tell me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing all the material and the extraction process. I think I watched the video when I was at the NABCEP conference with the company that was there, and you can't believe like all the steps they have to go through, all the intertwined elements that they have to like kind of extract and pick out and what they can
Yeah.
do with these things. Because that's one of the criticisms that people have is like uh they focus on the negative, like this stuff can't be recycled, but it can. And we just have to think of ways to do it. We just haven't been doing it before. This solar is still pretty new. It hasn't even hit its tipping point yet,
Right. It's
especially in the
crazy.
Midwest. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. When we started, it was all on the coast,
yeah,
California, New Jersey, New York, and Indiana. When you were talking about solar, it was like you were talking about some alien concept,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
I built a garage and I put solar on. Actually, I didn't put solar. I put an array behind it, and I just run it off of a 3 kilowatt inverter and a battery, except in the wintertime because I've figured out that it gets really cold here and my battery is like,
Yeah.
but that was one of the things that I didn't want to add more to the grid because I can run it off grid. I can open my garage door. I have a battery in it. So if
Yep.
that goes out, but it's being mindful. So what does the future look like for you in the terms of innovation, habitat, solar, and we haven't even talked about storage.
Oh, yeah. Storage. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think seeing these groups or like Solar Power World come out with these articles about manufacturers talking 800-watt panels or 900-watt panels. It's crazy, um, but it shows that the technology is still evolving. And if you're a solar company, I think you have to be nimble and almost have like an R&D person or within your procurement department and engineering department be aware of these new technologies that are constantly coming out because it totally changes your design, totally changes your footprint, and maybe you're talking taking up half as much land.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge when you're talking sustainability. There's a lot of farmers and a lot of folks that are still coming around to being okay with solar, and if you can show them that we're taking up less land actually now. It's not like, hey, we're taking up all of your farmland or we're having to knock down more trees for solar. I think that's huge. The more efficient we can get. So I see us getting more efficient in utilizing technology. And obviously, you want it to be proven technology. You don't want to be like R&D in some new equipment and have it fail. But um, so that's one area. I think pushing on the agrivoltaics and continuing to educate and help the industry grow in that realm because I still see a lot of arrays that are just doing some basic grass mix where they're probably having to mow it quite a bit still.
Yeah.
And that's time and energy and emissions, mowing. I mean, if you're doing electric mowers and batteries, okay, that's better. But you're not providing a whole lot of biodiversity. So the
I didn't think
more
about that. Yeah.
the more you can provide biodiversity under the solar, I think is a win for the environment in this world of climate change that we're dealing with. And yeah, I've learned a lot of just about the bugs and stuff that hang out. The more habitat you have, and then your butterflies and your birds, and so it's been cool to see some of our arrays that where the habitat, the pollinators grow up after 2, 3 years, and now you go out there and you hear crickets. You're
I never
see,
even thought about that.
yeah, yeah, just like you're seeing the butterflies, you're seeing birds come through, and that's been inspiring to see and makes you feel good about, okay, yeah, we need to keep doing more of this. Um, and then I think working in areas that are sometimes lower income too, these development zones, and I think the whole story about working with communities and teaching them about renewable energy and the benefits and it's clean energy, I think is another sustainability story. And sometimes we can even volunteer and go above and beyond in those areas and educate folks and or get them out there to see the solar array and
I
get
have I have
kids
one
involved
last
too.
question for you.
Yeah.
Are you seeing an uptick in carports? solar carports, because that is the one. I mean, that's like a no-brainer. You just it's
Yeah.
it's just where you're putting cars, and especially in the Midwest in the summertime. In the summertime, it is 9,000 degrees or it's 40 degrees, and it provides shade. It provides a lot of things that can sustain the grid. And I just saw one at a uh, junior high school, middle school that my daughter's middle. I was driving by and I was like, "Oh, they put this up,"
Yep.
and I'm like, "Why aren't they doing more of that in the Midwest?"
I think it's still gonna continue growing. There's so much potential, and I totally agree. You see all these wide open parking lots across the country when you're traveling, or even here locally. Um, there's a company here in town called Cultivate Food Rescue
Hmm.
here in South Bend, and they're regionally known and even I think gotten some national attention because they're relatively new. They're a nonprofit and they're doing millions of pounds of food rescue, and they repack food and serve like some lower income communities, and just are really creative in repurposing the food, not just like composting
Yeah.
the food. But anyways, they did like a maybe like a 200 kilowatt carport and out in
Wow.
front, and it's the biggest carport in South Bend, and it's I think the more people see that, the more they're like, oh yeah, we can do this. And there's might be grants out there. Like cities, I think are a great way. Especially if you're talking about urban heat islands and like all we have all this concrete and parking lot and um, maybe the more EVs that we're um, deploying, the more charging station capabilities. I think carports are kind of expensive because you basically have more racking equipment
Yeah. You're building
and
up.
you're building up and you have more material. So I think there is some hesitation to the carports, but I don't see it slowing down. I see you know as long as tariffs don't really jack things up, obviously. Sorry, we had to bring that up.
Like, shh.
um, because I know like things like the metals, aluminum, and it can be really impacted by tariff stuff. So yeah, I think carports are awesome, and we did a really big one at Michigan State. I think it was 2015 or 2016, and it was like I think it was 13 or 14 megawatts of DC,
Yeah, I believe
and
that.
uh, and it was one of the biggest carports in the country, and like one of like maybe the biggest university carport, and it still gets some attention. So yeah, I love carports, just like battery storage. I know we probably don't have time to dive into batteries today, but
I have let's go into it really quickly. So
yep,
what is your take on storage? Because you're dealing with very large site. This is not like residential where you're getting 10, 20 kilowatt hour battery. Here you're getting like megawatt hour battery or at least 500 kilowatt, 250 kilowatts, and you're putting those together because a lot of these are sustaining the grid. And what I mean by that is instead of firing up a coal plant, they can use this battery for triage, energy triage. Um,
yeah.
where do you see that in your landscape in the future?
In a lot of ways, I feel like battery storage is just starting. We've talked about batteries since as long as I've been in solar, or since Innovatus started in 2008. They've always been a part of the conversation. And in a lot of ways, it seems like it's still just beginning because
Yeah.
the technology is evolving and the price points of batteries are getting better and better. And I think there's more eco-friendly options in batteries because I know that's always a topic, that what kind of materials are these and where are we mining the materials like lithium, cobalt, and stuff. And I think, like you said, with utility, with backup capabilities, or like the frequency regulation, um, there's so many benefits to batteries, and yeah, I think we're just scratching the surface, and it's another part of that whole sustainability story of solar and the industry that continue getting better in storage. I think we still have a little ways to go.
On the commercial side, or
probably both. I think commercials maybe a little farther along, but from a utility scale, I think we're scratching the surface. And then, part of that's coming from Inovateus. We haven't done a ton of batteries because a lot of times it's like it's there, it's on the back burner, and then they say, our customer might say, well, we're going to do it down the road. We're not quite ready yet. We want to get the solar and that infrastructure installed first, and then they might design it in a way where battery can be added in.
That's a big plus about storage, because you can start with PV, sustaining the grid. And if you're conscious about how you're designing your system, what you're putting together, your vision for the future, you can design so you can come and blop and, I don't want to say repower, but augment power with storage at a later
Yeah.
date. Like I started seeing battery in residential probably 2019 slowly. And I think I was dealing with a company that starts with S, and they do a lot of residential.
Hmm. Yeah. Yep.
But then I started, now I'm starting to see a takeoff in the CNI space with these large batteries, large BESS systems. So
Yeah.
I think we still have a long way to go, but
Yep.
I think this next generation of folks coming into the energy space, that's going to be their norm. So they're going to expect that.
Yeah. I'm all for that. I think in some ways it feels like we're a little bit behind, like the technology's there. Um, and now's the time to really, crank on the storage aspect in the industry, because it's just a big part of the efficiency and the reliability of renewable energy, and it takes us away from, well, you don't have any power at night, or you don't
Right.
have any
That
power
was the
on.
big question. It was like, well,
Yeah,
I got solar. The big thing was, and I would say back prior to 2019 was, if I have solar, there's a storm came through, I still don't have any energy even though the sun's out.
yeah,
Or um my solar doesn't work at night.
in a blizzard. Yeah,
Yeah. Or there's
yeah,
snow on my panels and I can't. This is what I hear
yeah,
from customers, and this is mostly resi. And but that transfers over to utility side because
yeah.
they think it's an equal experience, and it's not.
Right.
But I want to thank you so much, Tyler, for being
Absolutely.
on the What's Up podcast.
Thank
What's
you
up,
for
sir?
having me.
No, and we got to get together. Here's my ask. If you do Battle of the Bands, I want to be in your band because I'm close.
Absolutely. You're in.
I could be guitar, I could be bass, I can't do drums.
Yeah,
That's you.
you're nimble. Well, or you can play the cowbell. Nathan played the cowbell one year, and we always need more cowbell.
Always need more cowbell. Hey man, let's not be strangers. If you need me, Emmitt the fractional trainer. So just reach out. Or if you ever want to come back on the podcast, you have something you want to share, I'm open. You have the link.
Yeah, would love to. Thanks, Emmett. It's
All
been a
right.
pleasure.
All right. Enjoy. See you, people.
See ya.